All right. Hello, everyone. I hope the sound works well and you can hear me. Just let's give a second to people who might be joining shortly. And I will just do some small adjustments to my camera setup, but otherwise I think it's all ready to go. Okay, so I thought I would, of course, this is the special GenCon edition. So you will see in a second a miniature from one of the newly released boxes for Malifaux 3rd edition. But before I get to that, I'll just want to do a brief summary of 2 previous streams. So here is the mature Nephilim that I painted during my first 2 streams. And it took me, well, about 5 hours of painting to get this guy done. And that's the one, of course, the one, I think I painted only the interior of the wings during the stream. The outer part was painted offline, and I also finished the base offline. So that's the one. And this is the miniature that I painted during the last stream before GenCon. So that's Yenza. So what I did offline was adding all the little ornaments on her robe, plenty of detail there, finishing off some small details on her back, and doing the base. At some point, I think I will have a stream just devoted to making bases. Oops, lost the focus. Get back. Yeah, here's the focus back. And I've changed my camera setup today a little bit, so it might be a bit more awkward for me to paint, but no, I think I will be fine. The details, everything should be visible better. All right, now on to the content for today. So we have Best Kept Secrets, new box for M3 with Titled Master, and there are 3 factions. I think it's unique in that regard, that we have Explorer Society, we have Guild, and Neverborn represented here. And I've assembled all the miniatures, and I've made up my mind about which one to show, which wasn't easy, to be honest. So let me show you these guys that I'll be working on. So first of all, let's have a look at the new Nexus models. So there's this tiny little dancer carelessly dancing away while a mutation, nasty mutation, is beginning to show at her back. So that's the first 1/3 of New Nexus. Hey there, this is the box I'm most pumped for. Yeah, it's a very, very cool box. 5 miniatures in it. That's another thing. All on 30mm bases. This one has some changeling vibes because you see a small boy in school uniform, looks almost normal from the side, but then when you move it around, you start noticing the different mutations and elements which are clearly not human. That's the second, and that's the third one. So let's start from the back. This looks like a girl who is leaning to inspect something, maybe a tombstone. And there is some nasty stuff going on with her head. It looks like her head is mutating into some kind of a spider thing. Really, really nasty stuff. But I have to say that the level of detail is so crisp here. You can even see the hem of her dress. All the texture is here. So painting it will be fun for sure. And even when you look at the texture of the hair, it looks amazing. I'll try to zoom it in without losing focus that much. You see different size here. So, I mean, it looks more natural. So really, really well designed miniature. And then the third one, well, the enforcer here is called Kavatika. This is a, I think in the video we're told that he's some kind of spy who got too close to Nexus and something happened to his face. So his face looks like it had, like a spider is trying to grow out there. So it's not even worse mutation than being a Neverborn. Wonder if that's what Lucius's face looks like when he takes off his masks, which he very rarely does. So an elegant long coat. Really, really nice miniature. He was a doppelganger that got infected by might. Yeah, that could be it. That could be the story here. Really amazing model. But the model that I've decided to paint for you guys today, or tonight, wherever you're joining from, is the new Lucius model, Lucius Unmasked. Some strong assassin vibe here. Still wearing the mask, but as you can see, the gloves are off. And this is the Lucius who decided to roll up his sleeves and just get down and dirty, do the work that he's been relegating to others. So this is the bitter assassin killer Lucius. Completely new dynamics. So this is my very professional miniature holder. So an old pot, 2 pieces of blue tack, and I'll just get the miniature on it, make sure it stays firm. You don't really need to get too fancy here, just it's a very light model, so as long as you press it gently, it will hold firm. What's the base? It's a resin base. It's a pre-made base. I think it's just wood themed. So as for the producer, I believe I think it's Micro Art Studio, a Polish company actually. I use it quite commonly. One thing I do for the bases, maybe before I start painting, is that I typically drill a hole, put a magnet in before I start the painting. I use a metal carrying case for my models, and that's one way to ensure that the miniature all your miniatures stay put, just to show you how it works in practice. Super firm, no risk of miniature falling off. And trust me, I've tried the foam, I've tried different ways, but this one seems to work best for me. But we're not here to talk about bases, we're here to do some painting. So I will be looking at the artwork from the box while working on it and trying to keep more or less. Hey, Emerit, all the love and good vibes back to you. Thank you for the sweet purple heart. So I will start with the base, and the way I tackle it, of course, wood is the main part, so I'll start with those little skulls. But before I even do the painting, I'll do the same thing I did for my previous stream, which is a very general overbrush with off-white color, just to bring out those details a little bit. Because for now I've used I sprayed on Wraithbone. Oh, and one thing to know about this miniature, and all those miniatures actually, I didn't use any modeling putty for assembling them. Nothing at all was needed. Those miniatures are so well designed. One thing to know while assembling the miniature, this is the glue that I can recommend, because it melts the plastic. It's got good consistency, easily applicable, because it's got this nice needle, so it's easy to apply it. And then apply it a bit. I tend to apply a bit too much of it, so I remove the excess with a piece of paper. And then, as you can see, there is, well, you need to look very closely to notice any places where the miniature was put from two different or a couple different pieces. Don't remember how many pieces this one came in, but not too many. So that's good to know when you tackle those miniatures, that they are super good. It's just a pleasure to assemble them. They are so well designed. It's unbelievable how much the quality. I mean, it was good to begin with, but now it's just top notch. Absolutely excellent. So let me start with a very, very general overbrush. So just to bring out the details just a little bit more. It will make the washes more effective, because that's what I'm going to be using a lot, washes and glazes, because those elements that stick out will be better defined when treated with a brush, with a wash. In a second, let me pause for a second so that you can see it, as the white stays on the elements that are more round. It's just about predefining before painting. It's not a necessary step, but I find it a bit helpful. There is a nasty little dot here, which I will remove later on. We'll just keep it obscured with dark colors, so no need to worry about that. Yeah, so that's the first part. Now let's move on to the base. I think this is going to be a longer stream. It should last up to 4 hours, so I will be finishing a little after midnight Central European time. So I should get most of this miniature done before the end of the stream. Now, I will start with painting the wood planks on the base, or maybe the skulls, just because it's easier to define the colors which are a bit brighter. So I'll start with contrast skeleton horde. Again, give it a very good shake. How to test if the paint is ready. Just look at the bottom. If it's dark, then it's not good to go. But if you see that the pigment has separated, so if you can see through the bottom, that means that your contrast color is ready. Just to give you, for comparison, another contrast paint, and clearly you can tell even here that it's not ready yet, because the contrast has broken here and the pigment has separated. It remains glued to the bottom, so that's why you need to give paints a good shake before you get started. And this relates to all the paints. You should just make a habit of that. So starting with skeleton horde, I'll just put some on the skulls, on the base. So it doesn't dry that fast. It also helps that it's not hot. It's getting a bit chilly. Feels like autumn already here. So the temperatures, I mean, the interior temperatures are still good, but it's different when it's really hot outside. Then the paints tend to dry faster. So I'm starting with the skulls, just making sure they are treated with some skeleton horde. I think those are the only two. This looks like a skull as well. I'll just put some wash on that as well. Now for the earth part, I'm not sure if it's soil or if it's dust. I'll just go ahead and use gray color on that. I'll use basilican gray. And here you can clearly see how much the pigment gets stuck to the bottom. So giving it a good shake. There you go. It's much better now. And I'll apply it onto this section of the base. The reason I'm choosing it because I will be using a little bit of brown, dark blue, so different mixture of warmth between the colors that I'll be using for the model. So I'll start by defining the base with rather dark cold gray. Then we'll have warm wooden planks, and I will add some spots of green to imitate some kind of natural growth on them. And we'll have some metallics on those nails, but those will be closer to the end of the stream. And then once it's dry, I will be dry brushing over it and then applying some washes, some glazes, just to tint the color slightly. So a question to those of you watching, have you bought anything during GenCon or have you decided to wait until general release? What are you excited about? What are you mostly looking forward to getting your hands on from the hobby perspective and from gaming perspective? I'm just curious to see some initial reaction. And actually this one, this is not a skull. This is not a piece of wood. This is a rat. This is a tiny little rat. Didn't even notice it before it was base coated. So rat will get different treatment. That will come later. Now, the planks. So I'll be using snakebite leather. Might seem counterintuitive to use this color for wood, but it works very well for what I want to have. So again, giving it a good shake. This box. Yeah, Rex Buster. And did you get it during GenCon or are you holding off buying it? This box for you too, yeah. I can clearly see why. Okay, I'll just grab a slightly bigger brush just to speed things up a little bit. Let's say this one. I just want one that you on both sides of. Yeah, this is something that this is a kind of trap that I believe many people will fall into. Just good way to buy into a new faction. I mean, the Explorers Society, I've been tempted to start this faction, but so far I've managed to resist it. But, well, you never know. Yeah, didn't have the time in Sweden. Yeah, I'm not sure how quickly things sold out during GenCon, but hopefully those miniatures will be available early in the autumn. I think the easiest way to get them if you're located in Sweden would be from the UK. So once they hit the shelves in the UK, you're basically good to go. So at this point, I'm just being careful to make sure that no base coat is showing through and have a good coverage all over the miniature, all around the base. This is a really good colorful wood, a base colorful wood, because I'll be tweaking it a little. So that's almost all for the base colors here. Just identifying little spots where I didn't get the color. And I did Cooper and Nexus. Next crew I think is Yenza. Oh yeah, Cooper and Nexus. I played a friendly game against Cooper, and what I like about that crew seems like every model has its place, its function. Each model can do few things, so it's not like you have a model that's limited to doing one thing only. There is a lot of versatility there. And the aesthetics are great. I had the pleasure of painting this crew. Super fun to work with. And that's a big crew. Like you have 3 totems to begin with. So plenty of miniatures. So when you look at it from the side, I will just gently let a bit more flow in here from directly from the brush. I will just load it with color and let it slide off the brush just to make sure that the edges are a bit darker. And I will do it also from this side. And having one more look to make sure I didn't miss any spots. I think I missed a little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah, and that seems trap of buying explorers. Yeah, that's a trap. That's a trap. You just once you start, difficult to stop. Tienza seems like a nice direction to extend, and the versatiles in explorers, they seem really handy for different crews, like the Emissar miniature, the Emissar model should work very well with both Yenza, Cooper, Nexus. I think it has its place, depending on how defensive, offensive you want to be, but it has its place. So let me pause here for a second. So that's the base, I would say, predefined. We have the core colors locked in. And at this point, I could use the hair dryer to speed it up a little bit, but I don't need to go fast today. I'll just move on to the miniature. while the colors here are drying. So now for the model, I think I will, looking at the box art, it has a cold dark blue hood, some nice intricate pattern, I believe, on the interior rope, leather straps, and then some metal elements, some metal bracelets, of course the signature mask, and the gloves are off, as we mentioned already. So I want to start with the dark rope that will be part of its hood as well. It seems like when I point my brush to the miniature, it loses focus. Yeah, with Explorers, you can really mix a lot. Okay, where is the focus? Get it back. It will be back in a second. Let's see if all right. Not there yet, but doesn't really matter at this point because I will be selecting colors. So I will be going with, I think, mixture of Achelian green, maybe some Basilicanum gray, maybe a touch of Thalassar blue if I want the blue to pop a little bit more. So those are the colors for the hood and the part which I would assume covers part of his back as well. Yeah, looking at the artwork seems like it makes sense, like those are two different, or maybe it's the same one. Actually, it could be that the cloak and the hood are the same color, or just hesitating here how to approach that, because it seems like there might be actually two different pieces of cloth. Yeah, clearly it looks like there is an interior rope which will be different, and exterior, which is probably part of this hood element. So I think I will get this one darker, this one dark blue. My main is actually Lucius, so my title Lucius will be opposite of my other Lucius. Ah, that's good to know. So what do you think about what the new Lucius brings to the game? Quite a different style. No longer a manipulator, controller. Corvo paint schemes. I think I tried this game a while ago. Didn't play it much, but I'm more or less familiar. I think it has a steampunk setting as well, so which is pretty cool. So now I'll be preparing my mix for the rope. Yeah, this one, it says on the box that it's green, but it's, as you can see when I spread it on the piece of paper, it's more of a bluish color than greenish. Teleporting assassin fits with Corvo as well. Yeah, teleport. So it's like, I haven't had a chance to read through the rules for New Lucius very carefully, but at first glance it seems like Seamus, only instead of gun you have claws and a number of ways to add pluses to your attacks. So while the damage spread, I think it starts with 2, it's not that complicated to get it way up. Different ways that I think it's easier with guild to get the pluses to your attacks. Although he has this ability to place a marker and just be a one-man army teleporting way up. Okay, it's maybe a bit more Basilicanum gray. Yeah, a bit more careful setup for sure. Okay, that's more or less what I'm looking for here. Good. So we have this dirty blue, dirty dark blue, which is the color I want to have. Venice Masquerade. Yeah, that's it as well. I mean, he's an assassin. He gets down and dirty, but he's still clearly careful about the way he looks. So I'll just start defining. So as you can see, the thing that I did initially, so doing this overbrush with brighter shade of white, once it's applied, I'm just being careful to control the flow of the wash here. I will darken it shortly when it's dry. So you can see those details become immediately visible. And at this point, the main thing is not to overdo it. Because if you create pools and they dry, it won't look great. So I'm just avoiding the hand now, just focusing on the hood. And I think it's this kind of material that you can use either as a hood or a scarf, whichever works best, whichever part you want to keep hidden. And Lucius himself is quite the character, He actually started in the first edition as a henchman. So those of you who started later on may be unfamiliar with this side of Lucius, that he was just a mere henchman. He was in a guild box, I believe, in the first edition of Malifaux. Don't remember the contents exactly, but he was definitely a henchman. Okay, so there is the hood, and now on to the rest. I will paint it piece by piece just to see whether it makes sense to separate different parts of the robe or just paint it as a one whole thing. Now when you add Lamian medium, the consistency is, well, the wash becomes a bit thinner, but the coverage is still very good. The pigment doesn't separate, which is what would happen if you tried thinning down contrast paints with water. So getting to the interior part now. And just making sure I don't put too much, because it's just much easier. Well, it looks much better if you put 2 or 3 thin coats versus one very thick. Now, here's the big question. I better take my mask off so no one recognizes me. Yeah, that's one way to keep your identity hidden. I think I will keep on doing going with blue all over this part. So applying a bit more of it. And as you can see, I'm just putting more of the wash on the cloak itself and then spreading it on the miniature. That way I have a bit more control over where it stays and where it gets removed. Yeah, so Lucius is and I don't remember his story that well. I read it a couple years ago. So those watching can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. Yeah, clearly you can see here that those are two different elements of cloth. But he quickly started building a reputation within guild and became a secretary to Governor General of Malifaux. So he was the kind of guy who was pulling strings from behind, the power behind the curtain, really. That's what he was. Big power. And the kind of person who used all the dirty tricks that he could to make sure that if he cannot get loyalty, he will bribe his way into making people listen him, or blackmail them, or make them sign documents that pretty much allowed him to control their lives. So very mean guy, and he was gradually building up his reputation within guild structures to the point where he was perceived by some as the real power, actually. Okay, so that's it for the, I think, the one more element here. Makes you want to bust out your contrast again. Yeah, why not? Those are really good products. Now a bit too much here. So now before it's dry, it's just easy to remove the excess. And I will be going over the whole robe again in a second. Just let me speed it up a little bit with some hair dryer. Do we even know his true intentions yet? Well, that's a good question. I don't think we know his true intentions. We know that he was looking for some unusual alliances, like reaching out to Titania. I mean, he had a meeting with her. First off, I think we don't really know whom he is, because it's indicated that there is something horrible happening beneath the mask. Because there were moments like I think McMorning had a chance to have a look at his face, and McMorning really liked what he saw. So that about says it all, right? If McMorning likes it, then it's either disgusting or so twisted that only his devious mind can appreciate it. So there is something really bad going on. My assumption would be that it's something like Coppelius, where there is a mass of tentacles, seeping wounds, different types of flesh blended together, just nasty stuff. That's my assumption. Some kind of nasty, never-born thing going on beneath that mask. And as for his intentions, well, he clearly enjoyed having power, enjoyed having control over other people. So maybe he's just a kind of vain creature who wants to rule other people and be respected by them. Or maybe it goes deeper. Who knows? And I actually like the fact that we get just snippets of what's really going on. We don't have full answers about whom he is, what's his face like, what his motivations are. We can speculating. Oh well, McMorning wouldn't go crazy. He already is crazy, right? He's this mad scientist. So crazy is one way of describing McMorning, I believe. I think don't remember. As I said, I read it a few years ago, but there was a moment where, as far as I believe, it was like Lucius walks up to McMorning, takes off the mask, and McMorning smiles and says something along the lines of, That's something I can work with. So if you look at the creatures that McMorning has in his crew, the undead mutations and all those nasty things, that tells you a lot. So again, one more layer of paint applied, one more layer of wash. And more hair dryer. Okay, so as you can see now, we are like 40 minutes into 45 minutes into the stream, and we already got a decent outline of where we want to go with the miniature. I would say it's tournament ready. I think the key requirement for tournament is that it has to have 3 colors, right? So we've nailed it. 3 colors, there you go. Ready for gaming. Now, the nice thing about using contrasts is that if you want to have some smooth level of transition between layers of paint, you can just keep on applying the same color over and over again, just bearing in mind that it has to dry completely before you apply successive layer of paint, and keep on darkening it where you want it to be darker. Just reapply it, rinse, repeat. So for example, I want these folds to be a bit darker, so I'm putting another one here, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there, just going along the line of recesses, letting the paint flow into them without drowning them with paint. Okay, just a few touches where I see it fit. And a little bit more of hair dryer. And now for some highlights, I'll be using skeleton bone. Give it a good shake. And I will mix that in with what I have on my little palette here. So just making sure I get a brighter shade and that the consistency is very thin. And I will do a few, I'll pick up some of the details here. So just going along the lines of the rope, just gently leaving the creased edges, maybe a bit more of that. just to make sure the color is noticeably brighter than what we have as base coat. As this pre-shaded base coat. Now we can no longer call it base coat, it's pre-shaded base coat. So just turning it around, and because what tends to happen is that the contrasts are a bit too stark, and I don't want them that much visible. I prefer to keep them a bit smoother. So a little bit more on his right arm. And now when it comes to the elements that are lower, I'll just gently highlight the very edges. And now onto the back. I think I will fill it down a little bit with water now that I've started adding regular paints to that. Because essentially what I want is to have this look that, well, while Lucius, as governor's secretary, he was known as a dandy. Clearly he's not a dandy anymore. So we don't want him to look like he's ready for some internal meetings with high guild representatives. So he wants to be, I think he wants at this point of his professional career, he wants to blend in more with the people in the street. So that's why the more rugged look seems a bit more suitable. And the thing about Lucius' story is that when he got really high into guild and he was close to, well, to the point where he was pretty much able to manipulate the governor general. Well, I don't want to spoil everything for those of you who haven't read the story. And also, to be honest, I don't remember all the details that well. But one of the things he did was to convince the governor general to try to assume power for himself. So in a way, Lucius is, well, he takes some responsibility for creating what came to be known as the Burning Man. So that didn't go very well for that governor general. And the new governor general was sent to Malifaux. I think his last name was Marlowe. Don't remember the first name. And since I haven't been following the story that closely, I'm not sure if he's the current governor general now. But that guy didn't like Lucius. And he lost a lot of power he gained over years or over time. Now I'm going to do a bit of a dry brush here just to create a bit more of contrast between the highlight, between the elements that are protruding and the elements which are in recesses. And Lucius started receiving tasks which were beneath him. So he started losing all the influence he's gained over time. But he still got so many people committed to his agenda by different means that he was still, well, he's not in a very bad spot. I'm sure the new book already shows what's going to happen to him when he hits the streets. Franco Marlowe. Franco. Yeah, Franco. Mr. Franco Marlowe. That was the name of the staff governor general that was sent to replace the governor general who well, it's not also clear what exactly happened to him. Has he ascended to some kind of godhood, or has he lost his consciousness and became some kind of astral being? That's not clear as well. So at this point, it's pretty well defined. And I'll be making sure now that the highlights are a bit smoother. So that means that I need to thin down the colors that I have on my very professional palette. Maybe go for a thinner brush. And just working along the lines that have been dry brushed. As you can see, it's got the consistency of pretty much dirty water. And very, very gently adding lines along these folds of material. Yeah, thanks for the sub. The more the merrier. Oh, and guys, there is this promotion going on that if you comment, if you subscribe to Wyrd Play, to Play Wyrd YouTube channel, and make a comment, leave a comment for any of the streams that are published there. There's quite a decent archive already. Then you have a chance of winning one of the new boxes. So minimum effort for a good chance of getting super cool box with miniatures and staying connected to your favorite company and making sure you receive all the notifications. And it's not only about painting streams. For example, now every month for the last couple of months, Wyrd has been releasing those previews of new models, and you get to see 360 presentation of new miniatures. So make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, and you are spoiled for choice because there are already quite a few streams that are saved there. Yeah, enter into the raffle. Minimum effort. And you may win one of those boxes that have just been released and that will be hitting the bookshelf, the stores sometime later this year. I think it's October, around October. And now what I do is just to make sure that I create a bit of texture. So I keep the brush damp, make sure it has a fine tip to it by twirling it on the palette, that it's loaded with color, because otherwise it would dry very quickly. And I just very lightly touch along the folds of the material to create this seemingly completely random pattern of dots, because this will add more texture. It will make it look more interesting. You could say more realistic, but I'm not after realism here, really. It's all about making sure that this large section of miniature looks fully three-dimensional and looks interesting. And you don't have to do them in a set pattern. I think the more random you get, the better. If you look at any kind of fabric, you will see that the way it reflects light, it absorbs light and reflects it back. It's always unique. So it's a good idea. If you want to get really good at it, take a picture of your trousers lying on the floor in sunlight and study how it's highlighted by natural light. or study some just classical art. Look at some realistic paintings and get inspiration. You don't have to limit yourself to just miniatures if you want to get deeper into the hobby. So now, since I was talking about making it a bit more interesting, I will now go with mid-brown wash and add a little bit, a touch of brown to the recesses, just to make sure that it's not just pure blue highlighted with different mixtures of colors based on blue, just making sure that we create an interesting effect. So again, adding those kind of dots to the darker areas. And I know they might be a bit shiny, they might look a bit glossy at this point. Not a problem, it will be all blended together when it's varnished at the end. And I'm using matte varnish, so the differences in intensity of colors here won't be that visible. But we want to make it look a bit dirty, a bit uneven. That's the look we're aiming for here. Okay, so now I think we can start with the mask. Why not the mask? Seems like a good moment to tackle it. Then with the hands, and then with more ropes. So for the mask, I will define first with dark brown. So I'm going to use Tiger Brown, I believe that's the name. Cannot even see it because it's too dirty. And this will serve as a good base coat for applying gold. So loading some of it onto the brush, twirling it on the palette, making sure that the bristle is filled with it. And also when you fill the bristle with paint, if you want your brush to be usable for a longer period of time, make sure that the fragment of bristle close to the ferrule, so close to the metal element here, does not absorb brush. So you should keep like 2 millimeters of it without paint, just making sure it's like 80% of the bristle has the paint, and that way you'll get to use it for much longer. Otherwise it just will it will deteriorate quickly. So now I'm using just the tip of the brush again to put a solid base coat on the mask, because I generally like to get the face painted early on, because this is the first element that many people look at when they see a painted miniature for the first time. It draws a lot of attention, and once it's done to a standard that you feel happy with, it just feels to me like it kind of takes the pressure off a bit, and you can just enjoy focusing on other elements. Now let's take some gold. Okay, we should be back. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think we're back. Sorry for some technical issues. Hopefully, no more interruptions. So let's hope we can continue with the stream. Yeah, we're back, and let's hope Waldo doesn't mess things up again. Something happened. Well, let's hope we're back for good. Now, so I'm back to painting the face mask. So again, mixing a bit of Cyber Brown with Glorious Gold, just to make sure I place it in a palette that way that I can go back to pure gold later on for next highlight. And I don't want bronze color, just a bit darker shade. And I'll be applying it onto the mask, making sure I keep some part of it much darker, just to make it pop more, because we want to make sure that his signature golden mask is visible. We don't want it to be blended in too much within the hood. So that's the initial color there. Already looks shiny and more noticeable. Now next highlight with pure glorious gold. So there it goes. So highlighting it. I think there was this historical drama about men in a mask. Kind of makes me think of it now. I might have watched it a while ago. So those are the kind of cheekbones on the mask. So making sure that I leave brighter shade of gold clearly visible there. And then, just to make it even more shiny, I'll be adding good old mithril silver. Just a little bit of it to be mixed with glorious gold. And here I still want it to be gold, but very bright gold. Not pure silver yet. Pure silver will come for the final touch. So again, twirling the paint here, twirling the brush on the palette, and picking up the protruding elements. So a bit more on the cheekbone, more on the nose. And adding a bit more silver to the mix. before I go with pure silver. This is the stage where it's really too easy. It becomes too easy to mess things up. So I'll just grab a thinner brush and be better be it's better to be safe than sorry. So very lightly touching the surface of the mask. And now if we want to make it a bit more yellowish, one way of doing it is putting in some contrast, which is what I will do. So I'll just take a little bit of Nasdaq yellow contrast paint. Maybe I will thin it down just a little bit with Lamian medium. So just drop of Lamian medium. Check on the palette that it has more of a wash, more of a glaze than a wash consistency. So very thin. And I'll just put it over the whole mask just to get it more saturation really. It dries very quickly, so I can retouch it with pure silver on the tip of the nose, cheekbones, eyebrows. Just very light touches there. The other cheekbone. Now it's time to paint the eyes, which will be a bit of a challenge because the eyes are kind of hidden deep into the mask. So I'm going to use Model Air Color by Echo because it's got very nice consistency. It's super thin, so it's easier to spread it evenly and dip the brush into it. Now comes the super tricky part, something that will really define the miniature, the final outcome, because I want to highlight where the eyes will be. And the eyes are not that well visible. You can see in the artwork that they are kind of glowy, but the pupils are not that well defined, so we need to take some extra efforts to re-pick them with thinned down red. Yeah, that's more or less what I want. So make sure that whenever you paint the eyes, you hold the miniature at an angle that allows you to get with the brush where you want to be. So that's why you will often see me holding miniatures upside down when painting these elements. And here there is still room for improvement because we'll be highlighting it with yellow before adding a glaze of red in the final stage, but we want to have a solid red which can slightly even overflow, but it's good. At this point it's not a problem. No. Yellow color. For yellow I will use Eurial Yellow, which has a pretty good pigment, and by saying that I mean that you don't need to apply few coats to get solid coverage on the model. So again, making sure that the point is super thin. I will touch on the eyes. Making a yellow dot more visible. Then I will follow up with touch of pure white and then red wash to finish things off, which should have this nice eerie effect. Okay, so the eyes are almost locked in. I will work a little bit more on the yellow here. Just push it closer to the nose. Yeah, that's more like it. And now just adding a bit of white to the mix, using that white, so pure white color. And it's basically going to be yellow tinted white, not pure white, slightly yellowish still. At this point, you want to make sure you have a very thin and solid tip of the brush, and very lightly make a dot in the middle, or rather not in the middle, rather closer to the nose area. After applying a red glaze, there's still an opportunity to modify it slightly, so it's not like now or never. You can still work things out a little bit. And now I will use blood letter glaze, which has a very nice consistency for what we're looking for here. Load brush with it. Pretty much drown the whole eye socket with red. Now you don't want to let it dry this way. You just take out most of the paint. This is where this magic happens, because at this point you get this glowy red eye effect. I will try to zoom it in. Yeah, so this is the kind of look that we're going for here. And if you want to be perfectionist here, you can still take this white that's on the palette, maybe blend it a little bit with yellow, just so that it's not pure white. And even after applying the wash, just add very light touch of white. Now this can be frustrating if you don't get it right. Don't get discouraged. I recommend practicing painting eyes just on a piece of paper. Make small dots within smaller dots within small dots. Keep at it. Take some time, take some practice before you feel confident. But the thing about never-born miniatures that makes it a bit easier is that they don't have human eyes, so there is less detail to be covered there. So a little bit easier. And now that the mask is pretty much good, I'll focus on his hands, which is another huge change to the model itself, because in previous iterations of Lucius, he would always cover his hands with elegant gloves. So now he's through with that. He doesn't care anymore. He just wants to get things done. That's why his unearthly, inhuman color of skin is showing, and that's what I will be focusing on next. So one thing to note about the hands on this miniature, look at how well the detail holds, how nicely designed it is. And I'm really impressed with the quality here. So for human flesh, very good color, Gallimon flesh. So I'll be applying it on the white base coat just to get the basic human skin color. And once I have it, I will add some highlights and then work with glazes to make sure it doesn't look like human skin. Because if you look at the artwork, it looks more purple than human. And that's the kind of look that I'll be pushing. So glaze, well, a wash of Gallimon flesh. This is a really quick and effective way if you don't feel super happy about painting human skin. You can get a really decent effect very quickly. And again, make sure that you remove the excess of paint left on the model, because otherwise it dries, and when you have pools of glaze that dry on a model, they look, the spots will be much darker and they just won't look very good. Okay, so the skin is pretty much defined here, and while we're waiting for it to dry completely, I will keep on working on his robes, and I think I will work on the bright white elements. Yes, so the sleeves, and looking at the artwork, I think that the section here is also pure white, so we'll make it dark white, because your shirt doesn't stay white if you go out in the street and do your nasty business there. So again, making sure that the base color is formed solidly, so I will retouch it with Wraithbone. And here, I think it's the shoulder plate. This is a leather element, so this will be a bit different, but I can still retouch it with Wraithbone to make sure that later on when I apply brown here, it will catch on a solid base coat. This is also a good moment to kind of clean the elements where you went over with blue. And you create a solid base coat for you to build from next stage. And this is a very light shade, so you might need to go back and forth between different elements a little bit, just to make sure that you have a solid coverage. Like here, I think I might paint the interior robes red, just to play with the guild idea, or purple. Don't want too much contrast in the color scheme, because there will be contrast with cold blue on the robes and warm brown on the leather elements anyway. Okay. So the skin looks dry now, so I will put a bit of highlight there using, again, this is an old Reaper paint. I cannot even read the name anymore, but it has this slightly greenish unhealthy look to it. So that's the look that I will be pushing, and making sure I have a fine tip on the brush. As I touch up on the fingers, knuckles, and the areas which are immediately visible. I just want to make sure I don't cover the nails, or I can cover the nails, but making a mental note here to return to the nails later on to make sure that, because nails are his main weapon now, so I want to make sure that they look distinctly different. So maybe add a bit of yellow there, or dark brown, or I could even add some gore effects there, just to play with the idea that this is his weapon. This can be highlighted with a bit of white that I still have on the palette. So I'll mix it with a bit of white just to have this nice gradient when I pick up the details again. So it's not pure white. Again, the previous color was mixed in. And here I'm just literally making small dots on the knuckles, on the joints, just to pick up the most protruding elements. Yeah, that's it. And now I will focus on making sure that the skin doesn't look human anymore. So there is a nice color for that, and that's Carlberg Crimson, which is this kind of slightly brownish shade of purple. And since this is a shade, I can thin it down slightly with water and apply it on the hands. And again, it's way better to put one thin coat, wait for it to dry, or speed it up with a hairdryer, rather than putting too heavy coat, too thick coat, because if it dries, it will just look messy. And then if you wait for it to dry before applying successive glaze, you give yourself space to push the shades a bit more. So I'll speed it up with hairdryer. And I will apply another glaze with slightly thinner brush, because I don't want to go over the whole surface of hands now. Just make sure that I get my focus in. Okay, there we go. So focusing on the part closer to the sleeve, and now tinting it a bit more and letting it go between the fingers a little bit. And now on his left hand, focusing on the area closer to the wrist. We want this unhealthy purplish shade here. He's not human after all. So removing the pink and making it a fair bit darker. Pushing a bit more into the area between his fingers. Also, whenever you work on such small details, make sure you rotate the miniature. So just to make sure you don't miss out on any spots. For example, here, this part close to the scarf otherwise would have been left without any highlights. And now I will pick Man of White highlight. Just for a very, very light touch on the knuckles, tips of fingers, just to make sure that there is a bit more contrast here. So here goes a spot on the knuckle and one next to it. Also closer to the mask. Going with a very, very thin, controlled movement here. Move very thin line. And you want to make sure that the paint is slightly watered down. If the contrast is a bit too much, you can still add a little bit of cardboard crimson, which is I think what I will do here, and have this muted pink applied. Okay. Went a bit too high with the miniature. Now bringing it back to the front of the camera. And wow, those hands, so nicely detailed. It's the best hand that's been made for Malifaux, I believe. Now I'll add a bit of more of a glaze because I want it to be slightly darker in the lower part to keep the part higher a bit brighter. So there is the hand. And I will pick up the nails with off-white. And these will be treated with darker shade. Think I might use the snakebite leather here, or maybe skeleton heart. Skeleton heart should be just fine. think I will use some gore effects here, but this will come after varnishing. So at this point, it's already quite considerable progress. The mask is ready. The purple hands, the dark mutated Neverborn hands are ready. So next I will focus on the white part of his robes. So the sleeves and part of the shirt visible next close to his upper chest area. And again I will use Men of White highlight for this one. So putting it on the palette, adding a drop of water to thin it down a little bit. When it's thinner, it's just a bit easier to control it. Plus, when you put it on a miniature, you can put it once, wait for it to dry, retouch it, and you gradually build up highlights with the same color. So that's a simple technique, but very handy. So following basically I'm using as for guidance the natural folds that are created on the miniature. So well designed. It's like having a map where to place highlights, where to keep the colors darker. But I want this white to be really dirty. I don't want it bright. I reckon I'm just going with the notion that it's no longer the dandy Lucius we've all come to know. It's the assassin from the street Lucius. So let it dry, and then I will just touch it slightly with pure white before giving it a bit of a glaze. Okay, pure white coming up now onto the sleeves. And you don't want to highlight along the whole surface, just focusing on the middle of the fold of the material. That's literally what I'm doing. Not going all the way. That's why we call it highlighting, creating this kind of natural gradient. Now that pure white was added, I will use light tone wash. So again, using quick shade here from Army Painter and applying it. But before I apply it, I will use a little bit of Lamian medium just to thin it down. So a drop of Lamian medium. And ready to mix it up. So that's the color that I have in the middle here. Kind of light dirty brown. Just looking at the artwork for guidance. And the previous work has allowed me to create a separation between muted white base coat and pure white highlights. And that's why this glaze just works a bit more efficiently. Okay, there it is. missed a bit of the interior part at the back, so I will get back to it now. And use the hair dryer again. I will remove the excess of paint here. A little bit too much accumulated there. And also a little bit too much beneath under the armpit. And now I'm ready to pick it up again using a mix of pure white with off-white, just very lightly picking up some of the lines here. Just a friendly reminder that this shirt used to be pure white back when Lucius was comfortably living in his manor, palace, wherever it is that secretaries to Governor General spend their time. Same on the other sleeve. Very thin lines. A touch of white on the elbow. And a dot in the middle of the section here. Yeah, washing with white Pride Minis. It's not pure white, exactly. This is the color that I use for base coat, Raid 1. But then when you dry brush it with pure white, you get this guidance, and you get a kind of map on the miniature that allows you to use washes effectively. And I think that it impacts the overall look of the miniature. They tend to be a bit brighter than painted with black base coat. But I would say it's a matter of like different strokes for different folks. So whatever works best for you. Just to give you some reference here, for example, this is the Yenza that I painted on my previous stream. And this was also used with white base coat. And to put something maybe in a slightly larger scale, this Lord Chompy Bits. This is the old version from first edition. This one was also painted with white base coat, whitish base coat. So I think it impacts the final look of the model significantly. But then working with black to begin with makes it maybe a bit easier to control the color in the recesses of the model. That's just a different approach. So I will now work on the dark interior part of the kind of shirt he has. It looks, in the artwork, it looks like dark purplish, something between purple and blue. So I think I will use the mix that hasn't dried completely, that I started the robe with. And I will put a bit of shyish purple to that. And that's the mix together with some lime medium. And this is the mix I will be using for this section of the model. Okay. And again, using my standard method of having a white sheet of paper on my workspace just to test the color. Yeah, that's quite different than what I had for the cloak. And I'm pretty happy with the color that I got. So on to the next part of the model. It's a bit different than the artwork, so there are some nuanced differences. It's not a huge difference, but still noticeable. So I want to make sure I have good control of that, and the elements that are the leather straps, I'm not too concerned about putting some purple on them at this stage because I will pick them up with white before applying brown glazes on them later on. So now placing a very thin layer of paint here, because this will allow me to clearly outline the area we'll be focusing on now. And if I want to keep it darker, I'll just put more of the same color here. If I want to keep it bright, I can just add a little bit of white to the base color. It's just, I like this stage when miniature seemingly starts coming to life. You have more variety going, and it allows you to appreciate actually the work that someone has put into designing the model. Just think about the creative process. What was the thinking? Do the artists that work on those miniatures read the stories or get some general input from Wyrd with rough description of the character, their stories, their backgrounds, and some general guidelines? It would be interesting actually to get some insights one day from people who design those miniatures, how they get about it, what kind of steps do they need to go through for the whole creative process to take place. So this purplish color is a kind of indication that, well, he may be serving the guild. Well, serving. I don't really know whom he's serving after all, but he may be affiliated with guild, but deep down he is still a never-born creature. Okay, so the base color is done, and now I can continue darkening it. So the saturation changes quite significantly when I apply the next layer of my mix, and that's what I want to have. For now, it's all about getting a solid coverage. And then I will start placing the highlights. Maybe I can also target some other areas to get a solid base coat there before I move on. And I think I will also put a touch of white here just to make sure it's noticeably different. And again, using this kind of dotting technique to play with the idea of texture. Okay, and now for his pants, I think I will go with, I think I might go with just gray. But before I do it, I will also need to think about this interior part of material. But that's the fun of it, when you are not limited to follow one specific color scheme, having this kind of freedom to decide where you take the miniature. This is one of the greatest aspects, one of the things that I really like about this hobby. That's where the creativity can kick in. But someone mentioned in the chat earlier on that some people might be using color scheme from Dishonored video game. My first association was Assassin's Creed, where there is a different assassin, so quite good references there for inspiration in terms of picking your color scheme. That's one of the perks of having cats at home, that you have there is always some hair from your cat floating around. All right, almost done with this section. But before I move on, I think I will apply Basilicanum Gray on the pants, just to keep them dark. Maybe mix it on the side of my base here. And applying a generous wash on them, just to kind of separate this area clearly from the one on top. It just makes it easier for me to focus on one area if I have a section next to it clearly outlined. Maybe just my thing, but that's how I like to have it organized. And now I'm thinking that actually red might not be a bad idea here. So I might use Blood Angels red, another contrast color, but I will make it a bit dirtier for the first layer. I'm not really sure which part of the material this connects with, so I'll just start with these flaps of material here with pure red. I mean, it's red mixed with dark blue. I just want to have next areas that I will be tackling on this model clearly outlined, because then I have a good overview of how it all looks together before I place the highlights and work on the shades. Just being very careful at the place where those two sections meet. Okay. I need to retouch it because some of the red went not where I wanted it to be, and I will just darken them a little bit. Okay. Now, I will be using what I have as base coat mixed with a touch of white. So, and now I will try to, there seems to be some kind of pattern, and I will try to recreate this pattern with this dotting technique, just to give a bit of texture to this material. It's all a matter of placing one dot next to another. And this will nicely match with yellow highlights, which will be added along the lines later on. So again, just using those small dots applied with the tip of the brush, just to give a bit of texture here, because it's otherwise it's a bit of a flat surface here, and just to make it a bit more interesting, I'm using this dotting technique. Didn't really plan it ahead. I was just thinking that I would simply go with the flow, see what works best as I gradually continue adding more color to the miniature. And that's what again, another thing I like about painting miniatures, that the creative process is not really limited to following one pattern. Well, unless you're painting, you're doing a commission and someone has requested very specific color scheme. Okay, I will kick it up a notch, bring it up a little bit with more white. And more white means that I will be extra careful with applying more dots. Okay, so it's beginning to look like some more structured texture now. Some more on the bottom section. You want to make sure that the tip of the brush is loaded with enough paint, because otherwise it will dry too fast. All right, I will now add even more white to the mix. Really pale color. So need to be super careful with this dotting technique now. Don't want to make it white all over. Just a few random dots here, a few dots there. Because otherwise this material doesn't seem that interesting to me if I was only applying very gradual, slow highlights on it. I want to make it pop a little bit more. Hence the idea of dotting technique, which was a bit spontaneous here. I think it will be nice when it's tied in with edge highlights of yellow. So he's looking like this kind of assassin who is trying to blend in as a merchant. Now I will get to those yellow sections. And for reference, I'm using the artwork from the box. So time for some yellow, for touches of yellow. So I'll be using, I think, sun yellow from Vallejo. And again, a nice trick to use. That's why I keep my mini palette next to my big palette. I don't want to apply pure yellow because I would need to put a few layers of it, which is fine, but then I want to make it more structured, so I will mix it in with the base color I have, and this will be the base coat for yellow highlights. So this greenish color that came out of mixing it with base coat, and I will very carefully apply a thin line which kind of organically fits into the whole composition. Now we need to be really careful here. You don't want to overdo it. And is this adding a printed pattern to the fabric, or yeah, it's kind of, you could call it this way, yeah. Just adding some kind of pattern to make it, my idea is just to make it look more three-dimensional. So gradually applying seemingly random dots, but making sure that I apply them using gradually brighter colors. Yeah, and we all have those, right? We all have those spur bases for mini palette. So why not take advantage of the resources we have handy? And this kind of idea, I think also it helps you keep the overall composition under control, because you have those base colors that you use for highlights, which just allows you to get a more coherent look. And again, checking on the artwork to see where I want the yellow highlights to be. But this miniature is really growing on me. It's such a nice model. And I'm painting this section won't be really visible, but if someone happens to twist the miniature, you will then, using this idea of mixing the dark base coat with different sorts of highlights, will allow you to just place the darker colors in the shade in a way that won't impact the overall composition in a negative way. Okay, so this is the base yellow, and time to keep it more vivid. So using the sun yellow, which is not super bright yellow, I will still be kicking it up a notch with Arial yellow shortly. But until then, just focusing. And again, not trying to cover the whole surface. So as you can see, I'm just using this motion of going up and down with my brush to make sure that I apply as much as I want in a controlled manner. And here we'll need to add a line separating the yellow highlight from white cloth, because otherwise it will not be visible. But that's fine, I will do it in a second. Let me just highlight other sections first. And this kind of mini palette, another good thing about it, it's reusable. Just sink it in water, and the next day you have a brand new mini palette. If you want to use more paints, you can just turn it upside down. For example, if you mix still water medium and work on larger swamp bases, that's what I would do typically. So again, using this motion of going up and down, making sure the highlights only touch the very edge. I don't want to go over the whole area which had been outlined with this darker greenish yellow before, and this creates this richer contrast. If you are extremely patient, you can do wonders with non-metallic metal technique this way. Well, thank you, Brandon. I'm glad you find it fascinating. I do, for sure. This is great process. Really enjoyable. And again, here on the side, making sure that the consistency is right. You can always double check it on the sheet of paper. Yes, that's what I meant. And time for kicking up the saturation a little bit. So Arial yellow, but I will actually even kick it up a notch by adding a small touch of white to it. So not using the mini palette, just not to confuse it with the previous color. And now I have, just for comparison, very, very bright shade of yellow, which I will use, again, using this dotting technique on the edges. For some reason, yellow tends to dry very quickly. And I don't want to hurry. A little bit to the side as well. Just try to conceptualize where the light would be hitting the model and how it would impact the way you perceive colors. Well, I need to do a little bit of cleanup since some of the yellow got on the leather pouch, which is not an issue because it will be made darker later on. In areas where I feel I've gone a bit too far, I will just clean it up immediately with using the base coat. So again, that's the advantage of having this mini palette, that you can go back and forth. And when you see areas where you think you've gone too far with highlights, you can put a small separation line, which will work well for the overall composition, like I will do here. Actually here, just to make sure I mark it clearly, I will use dark brown. Sorry if it's not clearly visible for you. Just being a bit too focused maybe to hold it in a different way, but there you go. Where I was concerned that the white blends in with the internal part of shade of the shirt, I just fixed that with a quick touch up of thin brown line. Now I will be doing the leather straps, I think. Yes, the leather straps. So before I tackle them, I will bring back the white base coat. So using Wraith Bond, and I will apply it with just my brush to make sure all the leather straps are clearly defined. Before I hit them with brown glaze. Well, brown wash to begin with. Then it will be glazing time. So I hope, guys, because I've been looking at fragments of my previous streams, I came to the conclusion that the angle at which I had my camera attached to the desk was not really favorable for the viewers. And now I'm making my life harder because I painted in a position which is not the most natural for me, but I hope that the quality is better for you guys because that's what I'm mostly focused on here, making sure that you guys get the best potential quality and the best viewing angle to observe the whole process. Now, this is an important stage and you don't want to rush it. So you want to very gently just paint along the lines of the leather straps. This one is actually should be yellow. I will come back to it and fix it in a second. And you need to be patient here because you will need to do it more than once. Go over the colors that have been placed them on those straps just to bring them back to this muted white again. No reason to hurry. Just take your time, bring them back. Putting some more white on the palette, and again, working along the lines of leather straps. I should take a proper picture of this miniature tomorrow if there is solid daylight, because I'm sure that I will make some more progress on it tonight or today, depending on perspective of the viewers. It's close to midnight in Central European time. Now, when I apply those brown washes, this should make it really pop nicely. Now, before I do it, I will clean up a few lines where I feel I want to bring more blue, for example, here. And here I want a visible touch of yellow. So I'll start with sun yellow. Place a small highlight. And before I go with browns, I will just maybe add one more thin layer of base color. So as I mentioned earlier, I haven't been really digging into the stats and abilities of new Lucius. I think Third Floor Wars had a battle report. They recorded one with new Riva, or Reva, however you pronounce her, and new Lucius. So if you want to get some insights into how he works in practice, make sure you check them out. They're on YouTube, and whatever software you use for your podcasts, you can find them there. I think that they released an episode on Euripides, which I'm eager to listen to, since he's one of the masters I play every now and then. So really looking forward to listening what guys from Third Floor Wars and their guests have to say about him. Okay, time for some brown. As you can see, now the colors are mainly cold. We have purple, we have some blue. So now I will make it a bit more lively with the addition of my favorite brown contrast color, which is called Gore Grantafur. And again, this is a color which is used, probably aimed for you, designed with the idea of using it for fur, but I really like using it for leather. It's such a nice warm shade. So, placing some of it on my palette, and now in slow control movements, I will be bringing out the leather straps. A bit too much, but still easy to fix. Earguard, I think. Aren't you the guy who made the app? That's, as far as I remember, is that you, sir? I mean, of course, the Wyrd app. So a few more brown lines here. And guys, I just got a note that we'll need to be wrapping things up in a couple of minutes due to the fact that, well, you can imagine that Word Office. Try to visualize an anthill, and an anthill into someone pours liquid iron, liquid aluminium. I think you get the general idea of how busy Wyrd people are at this point. So some things have come up, and instead of, well, I would probably be pushing for half an hour more, but I'm fine finishing in a second. I mean, in a second, in a few minutes. Oh yeah, that's you. Well, hats off to you. The app, wow. I don't remember last time I used cards. And not to take anything away from them because those cards are super well designed, but the app is just amazing. That's that's an absolute must for any Malifaux fan. And the fact that Wyrd also allows fans to just download the cards for free is amazing. So great piece of software that every Android or iOS user who likes Malifaux should have. And it's really solid. It works really well. So really well designed. So nice to be followed on my stream by a celebrity. Celebrity, I mean a guy who came up with the idea of the app and put it all together though. Again, hats off to you. You made life of so many Malifaux fans easier. So the browns are almost done. And there's this shoulder pad that he has, this leather shoulder piece that he's wearing. And I'll be showing off the overall look in a second. Okay, almost ready with the brown parts. Not for nothing, but I use cards. Yeah, it definitely helps opening up the game. Just people are concerned when they play for the first time, they don't know what cards to get, what kind of gaming aids, and everything is there. Even links to the core rules, so really great stuff. Okay, so before I wrap things up, I want to just show you an overview of how far we've made it. So let's just take a minute or two to have a look and reflect on the progress. So I started with his cloak, making sure it looks slightly worn, using some dotting technique, both in the recesses and on the highlights, and then moved on to paint the mask, which I hope you can see, and the hands. He looks really menacing. So the next steps, and of course then I painted his kind of vest that he's wearing using the dotting technique. I also painted the white sleeves, a bit of red which will be worked on next, and then some leather elements just to complete the main section of the model. I would say that's quite a lot for one stream, and I think I will continue painting him on the next stream, or I will paint something else. No, I think I will continue. I will save him for the next stream, which will be next week around the same time. Maybe I will clean it up a little bit before the next one, but I should be able to finish it next time I sit down with you guys. Just double checking how much time we have left. I think it's about just a few minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, for bringing it up. I will be painting definitely before the next stream. I will be doing some guild models. I will be sharing them on the Wyrd forums for sure, maybe on Discord too. And guys, whenever you get a chance, just final thing, let me show you the other miniatures from the set for those of you who joined later. So quick overview. We have Nexus here, 3 creepy kids, kind of partly mutated with some insectoid-like elements coming out of random places on their bodies. Kavatika, so the doppelganger spy who got too close to Nexus, and Lucius. Alright guys, so thanks a lot for following. Make sure you check out the other streams coming up next shortly after. Just follow the Wyrd social media and you will be up to speed with whatever is next. And I will see you soon. Enjoy your gaming, painting time, and I will see you around. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy the hobby. Goodbye.